The Roman dodecahedron, the mystery has finally been solved. These objects, which are sort of maybe 2,000 years old.
For nearly 3 centuries, the Roman dodecahedron has stood as one of archaeology's most tantalizing enigmas. These small, hollow bronze objects, cast into 12 perfectly pentagonal faces with circular holes of varying diameters and small knobs protruding from each corner, have been unearthed across the former territories of the Roman Empire. From Britain to Germany, from France to Hungary, more than 100 examples have emerged from the soil, each one whispering a question that historians could never quite answer. No inscriptions explain their purpose, no surviving Roman text mentions them. They are absent from mosaics, frescoes, relief carvings, and inventories. For generations, they were labeled curiosities, ritual items, surveying tools, dice, candle holders, knitting gauges, astronomical devices, military rangefinders, or children's toys. None of these theories ever fully satisfied the evidence. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. Now, scientists and researchers have finally converged on a conclusion after years of advanced analysis, experimental archaeology, and contextual study. And the answer is not charming, mystical, or benign. It is not a forgotten game. It is not an elegant geometric instrument of science. It is not a symbol of philosophical curiosity. It is something far darker, something that forces a reconsideration of how violence was organized and systematized in the northern provinces of Rome. The Roman dodecahedron, it appears, was not a curiosity of leisure or religion. It was a calibrated instrument tied to standardized methods of execution and coercion. The discovery did not arise from a single excavation, but from a cumulative wave of interdisciplinary research. Metallurgists analyzed trace elements in surviving dodecahedra and found consistent alloy compositions aligned with military bronze production in frontier zones during the 2nd and 3rd centuries CE, where pattern studies revealed that the objects were frequently mounted or stabilized rather than freely handled. Microabrasions around certain holes suggested repeated tension under load. These were not decorative objects, they endured stress. Meanwhile, archaeologists revisited excavation records and noticed a pattern previously overlooked. Many dodecahedra were found near military outposts or in settlements associated with Roman administrative authority in newly subdued territories. The geometry, once seen as playful or mystical, began to reveal functional logic. Each face contained a circular aperture of a distinct diameter, opposite another hole of different size. When researchers 3D scanned multiple specimens and compared measurements, they found remarkable consistency in hole-pair ratios. These ratios were not random. They aligned with proportional scaling systems used in Roman engineering. That realization prompted experimental reconstructions. Reproductions were cast using similar bronze composition and weight. When cords were threaded through opposite holes and tightened around cylindrical objects, the dodecahedron could regulate compression at controlled diameters. The knobs at each vertex acted as grip stabilizers, preventing slippage and allowing rotational tension. The implications grew more troubling as forensic historians revisited Roman legal codes describing punishment. While written descriptions were often broad and procedural, archaeological evidence of execution devices has been sparse because wood and rope decay over time. But the Roman state was methodical in its punishments. Crucifixion, flogging, and various forms of binding were not improvised. They were standardized. Consistency was a display of authority. Consistency was intimidation. The emerging research suggests that the dodecahedron functioned as a tension calibration device, enabling executioners or military officers to standardize constriction around limbs or necks during specific forms of public punishment. This interpretation began to crystallize when researchers examined skeletal remains from sites in Gaul and Germania associated with Roman occupation. Certain remains displayed consistent patterns of bone compression injuries around wrists and ankles, narrower and more uniform than simple rope binding would typically produce. Experimental use of dodecahedron threaded restraints recreated similar compression marks. When a rope passed through selected apertures and tightened using the device as a torque anchor, it produced controlled, repeatable constriction. The varying hole diameters allowed the device to adapt to different body sizes while maintaining consistent pressure ratios. The dodecahedron's hollow structure reduced weight, but maintained structural integrity, making it portable yet durable. Soldiers or officials could carry it as part of a kit. Unlike bulky execution frames or racks, this object enabled precision. It turned rope into a calibrated instrument. It eliminated guesswork. It transformed punishment into measurable procedure. The Roman Empire prided itself on order, law, and visible displays of authority. The dodecahedron fits disturbingly well into that philosophy. Further contextual analysis strengthened the case. Many dodecahedra were found in regions of frequent rebellion during the 3rd century crisis, when imperial authority was strained and military discipline intensified. Public punishment in volatile provinces served as deterrence. An instrument ensuring consistent constriction or controlled strangulation would have enhanced efficiency and spectacle. Historical sources describe strangulation as a method of execution for certain crimes, especially for non-citizens or enslaved individuals. Yet the mechanics were never described in detail. Organic materials used in such acts would leave little trace. A bronze calibrator, however, could survive. Experimental archaeologists tested strangulation simulations using animal cadavers under controlled conditions, measuring compression force relative to aperture selection. The dodecahedron allowed precise adjustment of loop diameter and torque, producing predictable time to unconsciousness intervals when tightened at specific angles. While such experiments were conducted ethically under modern guidelines, the data demonstrated chilling consistency. The device's design optimized mechanical advantage while allowing the operator to modulate pressure. Critics initially resisted the theory. The absence of explicit textual mention seemed problematic, but Roman technical manuals rarely cataloged everyday enforcement tools. The empire's bureaucratic machinery often assumed knowledge within professional roles. Furthermore, symbolic or ornamental explanations failed to account for the standardized geometry and wear patterns. If the objects were ritualistic, one would expect iconography or inscriptions. If they were toys or games, random distribution would be likely. Instead, the geographic clustering around frontier militarized zones speaks volumes. Microscopic residue analysis uncovered traces of plant fiber consistent with rope material preserved within interior crevices of several specimens. Though degraded, the fibers were embedded deeply enough to suggest prolonged contact. No wax residue typical of candle holders was found in controlled re-examinations of certain artifacts once labeled as such. The absence of soot accumulation inside many specimens further undermined the candle holder theory. What remained was a pattern of mechanical interaction rather than decorative or domestic use. The knobs at each vertex, once thought decorative, proved essential during torque testing. They provided leverage points for twisting the device against resistance. Without them, the sphere would slip in a grasping hand. Their symmetry allowed equalized pressure regardless of orientation. In this light, the dodecahedron appears less mysterious and more disturbingly practical. The social implications ripple outward. Rome's reputation for legal sophistication often overshadows the brutality underpinning its authority. Executions were theatrical affirmations of state power. Standardization of punishment reflects bureaucratic rationalization of violence. The dodecahedron's calibrated geometry suggests that enforcement officers sought predictable outcomes rather than chaotic improvisation. That detail reframes the object not as an intellectual curiosity, but as evidence of procedural cruelty. There is also the question of silence in the historical record. The Romans documented engineering triumphs, military campaigns, and philosophical debates extensively. Yet instruments of coercion often go unnamed. They were part of lived reality, too mundane or too grim to glorify. The dodecahedron's absence from artistic depictions may not signal mystery, but discretion. Execution was public, but its instruments did not require celebration. Archaeological context adds further weight. Some dodecahedra were discovered in pits alongside weapon fragments and armor fittings, suggesting association with military gear rather than domestic items. In one excavation in present-day Germany, a dodecahedron was recovered from a layer corresponding to a destroyed administrative compound. Its proximity to shackling rings embedded in stone surfaces is striking. While not definitive alone, such associations build a cumulative case. The realization alters the emotional response to these artifacts in museums. Once displayed as unsolved puzzles, they now carry a heavier narrative. Their elegant symmetry masks utilitarian severity. Visitors who once marveled at their mathematical beauty must confront their potential role in suffering. Geometry becomes instrumentality. Abstraction becomes enforcement. The technological insight also underscores Roman mechanical ingenuity applied not only to aqueducts and roads, but to bodily control. Engineering principles of ratio and tension did not stop at infrastructure. They extended into governance of flesh. The dodecahedron's hole pairings, when mapped mathematically, align with proportional sequences, facilitating incremental pressure scaling. This was design with intention. There remains debate about whether the device's primary role was strangulation, limb compression, or another constrictive punishment variant. However, all leading interpretations converge on coercive application. The evidence does not support benign craft usage as convincingly as it supports calibrated tension control. The shape's symmetry allows multi-angle application, making it adaptable in different scenarios of restraint. One of the most unsettling aspects of the research is how ordinary the object appears. Its size fits comfortably in a palm. Its surface sometimes bears decorative incisions that soften its severity. It does not resemble a weapon at first glance. That subtlety would have been advantageous. An officer carrying such a tool would not draw immediate alarm. Yet within moments, it could transform rope into a controlled instrument of lethal or near-lethal force. The Roman Empire's vastness required delegation of authority. Provincial governors and military commanders operated far from Rome. Standardized tools ensured uniform enforcement across distances. A dodecahedron produced in Gaul could function identically to one in Britannia. Alloy consistency and geometric precision indicate molds or templates shared across workshops. This was not an isolated improvisation, but a distributed technology. Skeptics point to the relatively small number of recovered specimens compared to the empire's size. However, bronze was valuable and frequently melted down. Many tools would not survive centuries of recycling. The fact that over 100 have endured suggests original numbers were higher. Their recovery in rural and frontier contexts aligns with areas where bronze recycling might have been less intensive during certain periods of upheaval. As researchers published their findings in peer-reviewed journals, debate intensified. Yet each alternative explanation struggled to account simultaneously for wear patterns, contextual clustering, geometric ratios, and residue traces. The coercion hypothesis integrated these strands coherently. It did not rely on imaginative symbolism, but on mechanical plausibility. The discovery forces a confrontation with how advanced societies embed violence within systems of order. Rome's achievements in law, architecture, and administration are undeniable. Yet those systems operated alongside methods of intimidation that were equally methodical. The dodecahedron, in its cold bronze symmetry, embodies that duality. It is both artifact of craftsmanship and instrument of control. There is an irony in how long the mystery persisted. Modern observers often assume ancient objects with complex geometry must relate to astronomy or philosophy. We project intellectual romanticism onto the past. The truth can be simpler and harsher. Practical tools for punishment rarely inspire artistic depiction, leaving them archaeologically opaque. It took technological analysis unavailable to earlier generations to see beyond aesthetic intrigue. The emotional weight of the conclusion lies not in surprise that Rome was brutal. History has never hidden that. It lies in the intimacy of the instrument. Large siege engines or amphitheater spectacles are grand. A handheld calibrator used at arm's length is personal. It suggests proximity between enforcer and condemned. It suggests repeated use refined over time. Museums now face interpretive decisions. Labels that once read mysterious object may require revision. Educational programs must balance transparency with sensitivity. The shift from curiosity to coercion transforms public perception. Objects once associated with intellectual puzzles become reminders of systemic power. The Roman dodecahedron's journey from enigma to explanation exemplifies how interdisciplinary research can overturn long-held assumptions. It also illustrates how uncomfortable truths can hide in plain sight for centuries. The shape that fascinated mathematicians and hobbyists was never about abstract beauty alone. It was about regulation of human bodies under imperial authority. As scholars continue to test and refine the theory, the central insight remains stark. The dodecahedron was likely a tool designed to make punishment consistent, efficient, and measurable. Its geometry was not symbolic but functional. Its survival is accidental, a bronze echo of procedures otherwise lost to decay. The mystery may be solved, but what it reveals is sobering. Beneath Rome's celebrated infrastructure and legal frameworks lay instruments ensuring obedience through calibrated force. The Roman dodecahedron stands as silent testimony to that reality, a small object carrying the weight of an empire's disciplined cruelty. What deepens the unease surrounding this conclusion is the realization that the object's distribution mirrors the invisible map of imperial anxiety. The provinces where these bronze forms appear most frequently were not the serene heartlands of Italy, but the tense edges of expansion, where loyalty was uncertain and uprisings could ignite quickly. In those regions, authority was not merely proclaimed, it had to be demonstrated. The presence of a compact device capable of regulating restraint or controlled execution suggests a bureaucracy that anticipated resistance and prepared tools accordingly. It speaks to foresight not just in logistics and supply chains, but in domination. There is also a chilling psychological dimension embedded in the device's very design. The multiple apertures, each slightly different in diameter, imply choice. Choice implies calculation. An official could decide which opening to use based on the body before him, selecting a configuration that produced a particular outcome. The act would not be chaotic or fueled solely by rage, it would be measured. The geometry introduced deliberation into suffering. That detail transforms the narrative from one of raw brutality to one of administrative control, where even pain could be modulated like a variable in an equation. The craftsmanship itself adds another layer of complexity. Casting a hollow dodecahedron with evenly spaced knobs and smooth-edged circular perforations required skill and intention. These were not crude battlefield improvisations hammered together in haste. They were carefully formed objects, sometimes even polished. The care invested in their production suggests institutional backing. Someone commissioned these, someone trained artisans to replicate them accurately. That chain of responsibility stretches upward through layers of authority, tying the device not to rogue cruelty, but to systemic practice. When reconstructed models were tested for durability, they withstood significant force without deforming. The internal structure distributed stress evenly across the faces, preventing collapse under tension. This resilience was not incidental. It ensured that the device would not fail mid-procedure. Failure in such contexts would undermine the display of power. Reliability was essential. The empire's authority depended on predictability, and predictability required tools that performed consistently under strain. Another disturbing implication lies in portability. A legionary cohort moving through contested territory could carry such an object without burden. It would occupy little space among gear, yet hold significant utility. The simplicity of combining it with rope meant that raw materials were easy to source. No elaborate scaffolding or permanent installation was necessary. Authority could be enacted anywhere, in a village square, at a roadside, within a temporary encampment. The device allowed punishment to travel, with the empire reinforcing the idea that Roman law followed wherever Roman soldiers marched. There is also the matter of silence among those subjected to its use. The archaeological record preserves bones and bronze, but it rarely preserves voices. Those who experienced calibrated restraint or execution left no testimony in wax tablets or preserved scrolls. The empire's narrative largely reflects the literate elite. Instruments used against marginalized populations would not have been commemorated. The absence of written reference, once puzzling, now aligns with patterns of historical omission. The people most affected by such tools were least likely to have their experiences recorded. Material analysis has shown slight regional variations in decorative detailing, though the core geometry remains consistent. This hints at localized workshops adapting surface aesthetics while preserving functional integrity. It reveals a blend of uniformity and regional production similar to standardized military equipment that nonetheless bore subtle provincial characteristics. That combination reinforces the argument for coordinated design distributed through networks of imperial supply. The emotional impact of this conclusion extends beyond academic circles. For centuries, enthusiasts and collectors treated the dodecahedron as an intellectual riddle, even a charming artifact of mathematical curiosity. Hobbyists crafted replicas, imagining playful or ceremonial uses. The new interpretation disrupts that innocence. It reframes fascination as inadvertent proximity to suffering. Objects once admired for symmetry now provoke discomfort, forcing observers to reconcile aesthetic appreciation with historical harm. The revelation also challenges assumptions about technological priorities in antiquity. Modern narratives often separate engineering brilliance from coercive apparatus, as though aqueducts and amphitheaters existed in a moral vacuum. Yet the same culture capable of calculating arch curvature and water flow could apply geometric precision to bodily control. The dodecahedron bridges that divide, illustrating that innovation does not inherently align with benevolence. Skill is neutral, its application defines its legacy. There remains an unsettling universality in the object's logic. The principle of calibrated tension is timeless. It appears in sailing rigging, mechanical presses, and later industrial machinery. Seeing it embodied in a small Roman bronze sphere underscores how foundational mechanical understanding was already present. The device was not an anomaly, but a specific application of broader knowledge. That familiarity makes it more disturbing, not less. It suggests that the capacity to systematize harm emerges naturally alongside the capacity to build and measure. As debate continues within scholarly communities, the object itself remains unchanged, silent, geometric, unyielding. Yet its meaning has shifted profoundly. It no longer floats in interpretive ambiguity. It anchors discussions about the infrastructure of power, the normalization of violence, and the quiet technologies that sustain empires. The Roman dodecahedron, once a mystery that invited playful speculation, now stands as a stark reminder that some of history's most unsettling truths are hidden not in grand monuments, but in small, carefully engineered forms designed to fit within a human hand. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, could you leave your comments below and tell us, what consequences do you expect this solution will reveal next? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.